Jim, was your line through journalism? Did you as a kid, you wanted to follow that? Were you interested in being a sports writer? Like, how did you come?
Yeah, how you get involved with this
How did you
stuff?
get to this point?
I love sports, and I was a tennis player, and played tennis in high school, and we were city champions and so forth in Denver growing up. And I loved sports and playing sports and watching sports. And so when I was a freshman, summer freshman college going to, I went down to the ABC station in Denver and asked for an internship or a job, and they didn't have anything. And they said, if you get into school, college, you'll come back and try for an internship. So I went to college, and the first day I was on campus, I saw the man who I interviewed with. He said, go over to the journalism school and try and get an internship. So I got an internship. I was there for a month or two, and they were converting from film to videotape. So all the guys who were in the union for the film took the buyout. So they hired me, and I got hired as a videotape editor. Nobody knew how to videotape editor, so I was 17 or 18 years old, so they were teaching yeah, that's good. So they paid me a lot of money. Paid me like $25,000 when I was 17 years old.
That's crazy.
And I thought that was more money than I'd ever have. So I was able to buy my car. It was a Toyota Corolla, and that cost like $1,700. And then I bought beer for everybody, in the dorm. I'd get a cake for them every week. And I still had $22,000 after that, So anyway, one day I was in my edit booth. I was editing. Red Miller was the head coach of the Denver Broncos. I was editing the Red Miller show at 7:30 in the morning. And the lady who was the head of the bureau for assignments came running and she says, you know something about sports, don't you? And I said, yeah, a little bit. She said, Muhammad Ali's at the airport. He took an earlier plane. He's 2.5 hours early. Go out and interview him. Because back then, there were no cell phones. There were no beepers. There were no computers. No. If you did not answer your home telephone, they couldn't find you.
Right.
So they couldn't find the anchor man. They couldn't find the lead sports guy. They couldn't find any of the reporters. They couldn't get any. Nobody's answering their phone. They were sleeping. They were in the shower. They were breakfast. No, God knows where they were.
No pages back then.
Nothing. So I ran into the weatherman's office, took his coat and tie. Didn't fit. It was a little itty-bitty guy named Stormy, and the sport coat came up to here. So I took it off, but I took his shirt and his tie, and I went out and interviewed Ali.
Oh, my God.
Ali was coming to town. He was going to talk. He was talking about his fight with Spinks was coming up, and then he was going to fight a guy named Lyle Alzado, who was a Denver Bronco.
Yes.
In an exhibition after the Spinks fight.
That's right.
So I interviewed him. He gave me 45 minutes. He was great at the airport. He was just wonderful. He was patient. He was nice. He was funny. He was thoughtful. He was all those things. He called me the local young Howard Cosell. So anyway, I took the interview back and was going to edit myself out of, they weren't going to put me on the air. I wasn't on the air. So the head of the bureau came in there, the news director, a guy named Roger Ogden, and he looked at this. And I don't think this guy even knew my name. He didn't even know my name. He said, you interviewed Ali today? I said, yeah. He said, let me see it. Showed him all 45 minutes. He said, let me see that again. So he spent an hour and a half with me, and he looked at me, and he said, we're going to put you and this on the air. It's barely adequate. So I tell everybody I've been barely adequate ever since. So ABC saw, the people there at the station saw that Ali took a liking to me for whatever the reason. So they then sent me to all of his fights to do an interview. Well, then Bob Arum saw that.
Wow.
And he hired me. Don King saw that, and he hired me. So I worked for Top Rank and for King Vision, Top Rank first, doing all these interviews before the fights with all the fighters and then after the fights. And then they would put them up, on these satellites in the early advent of satellites, and everybody would take them down and use these interviews, and it would help them, promote the early days of pay-per-view was closed circuit in the theaters, or, you'd have to go someplace to watch the fight. And then you'd pay like $20 to get into the fight. You weren't born when there was closed circuits. Well,
I just started. When you had closed circuit started at 78.
No, I'd say early 70s.
Yeah.
So like 70, or probably the first Ali Frazier fight, 71.
Yeah, 71 probably.
Yeah. So, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they were figuring out how to deliver it to the homes, the theaters and all this. So anyway, Bob Arum hired me and was great to me. Then Don hired me, and so that's how I really, became a sportscaster. And there was no grand scheme or plan or thought. It just happened by happenstance that Ali came early, and Ali was great to me, and that was my first interview. And Ali, was honored me. All those years later, he let me do his last interview on television.